Hi, Dakota. Thanks so much for meeting up and talking about your new filter resonator module design.
Yeah, just looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's a great module. I have a prototype of it right here, and we're gonna be listening to it as we're chatting through it. Um, so let's get right to it. Tell us about your the design background, the inspiration for the filter, and how you came upon this particular design and concept.
So the beginning of the design was very much the ARP 1047 SVF, which is found in the big 2500 ARP synthesizer. Um, it's kind of one of the first really high Q SVFs that could do really high Q without self-oscillating,
Mm-hmm.
um, without like it wasn't meant to color the audio. It was meant as a really refined subtractive tool. I mean, it did color the audio because it was all made out of transistors and it's pretty crunchy, the original.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I really, really loved some pieces that I'd heard by an artist named Eliane Radige, which I hope I'm saying it right. And she used the 1047 module specifically with a very high Q to kind of like pull harmonics out of complex audio. And it's kind of like an extreme subtractive tool to find the little arpeggios and harmonies and stuff that exist inside more complex audio. And it fascinated me.
The main unique feature of this filter is that there are three different signal inputs that interacts with the filter in different ways. And so I'm going to have you go through those three different inputs and what they do.
Yeah, so there's three inputs. There's a main input with an associated gain knob, which can
Mm-hmm.
trim the input of that of your main input. And then there are two um, limited or automatic gain compensating inputs. One is a static limit input that the amount that it attenuates your input is linked directly to how high your Q is,
Mm-hmm.
either by the knob setting or by CV input.
Mm-hmm.
But it won't react to the actual input amplitude. It won't react to, at certain settings, the filter can amplify things like to the rails, huge. So that the limit input will not react to things clipping or overcoming it or anything like that. The other input, the AGC input, is the kind of the new thing
Mm-hmm.
that um, I came up with through talking to a couple different people. And it was that patch that Eliane did. She did like I was reading about her process and it's incredible. Like she would just multi-track over and over and over again and layer all of the things and take all the best takes. And basically it was just incredible amounts of practice
Mm-hmm.
to like dial in all those perfect little points. And the AGC input on this is a attempt to um, make that a little bit easier and easier to dial in. And what it does is it's a compressor on the front end of the filter
Mm-hmm.
that is side chained or controlled by what's coming out of the filter. So if the filter core is amplifying something past a certain threshold, it automatically is turning down your input in kind of a balancing act to try and even keep everything evened out all the time.
In addition to all these really interesting design choices around the resonance, and the limiting and the compression. You also call this a resonator module. So there's also a percussion section with its own resonance control. And there is, a couple of inputs that are not usually found in filters is a trigger input and a gate input. So my understanding is the trigger is for pinging the filter, right? In
Yeah.
essence, yeah.
Yeah, so the trigger input, anything that passes a threshold of about 1.5 volts is automatically conditioned into a strong pulse signal to kind of strike the filter. So it's like a strike or a ping. On the ARP 1047, they called it a trigger input. So that's what I've called it. The gate input, when percussion mode is active, the gate input acts like a switch that's operated by your gate voltage being high or low. And on the ARP 1047, the idea was that you'd plug in your trigger, your gate, and your volt per octave signals all from your keyboard. The trigger input would ping the filter. When you were holding a key down, the gate high, you could set your resonance of the filter when you're holding a key very high so that it would activate it and ring. Then when you let go of the key, you could have a second resonance level that would be active as soon as you let go. And that would kind of be your either gating it and it would just shut it off, or if your resonance is kind of midway, it ends up being kind of a decay time.
Yep.
And it's just the natural decay of the resonant filter. So when the percussion mode is on, you plug in all your signals and you can use it as kind of a sine voice, and it's very useful for percussion, which I assume that's why they call it percussion mode, because as soon as you plugged it in, it just wants to be a drum.
The resonance on this filter, like you said, can be really high or very strong, and yet it doesn't on its own, it doesn't self oscillate because you have to patch it to in order to do that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So a classic SVF, state variable filter circuit, if it's built properly and there hasn't been anything added to make it self-oscillate, it should never self-oscillate, because it's like the original paper that the designer of the ARP 1047 wrote was the name of the paper is basically the unchangeably stable filter. And it was and the stability of the filter was what he was focusing on to try and make it I haven't talked to him. I think he's passed away before I got into synthesizers, but it looks from like the paper that he really wanted to build a clean tool for processing more complex audio, and he didn't want it to color the audio too much. So that's what I tried to do with a little bit more modern parts with this one, and tried to get that same extreme high Q so you can really reduce your bandwidth and really narrow in on like a single little slice of audio. But you do need an input audio for anything to happen. If there's no input, then there's nothing for the filter to process, and you don't get
Right.
an output. The cool thing I noticed halfway through working on this thing is because the AGC input is a reactive input. If you plug the bandpass into the AGC input, it will kind of automatically compensate for things running away, and it will just kind of keep things stable. So
Yep.
that's one thing that this filter does that the 1047 can't, unless you've got a lot of patience to set it up to the perfect spot.
Yeah. Oh, one last thing before we sign off is the availability of this module. I know that, I've got a prototype, you've got one, and I know that right now there's a bit of a worldwide shortage of electronic parts. So, yeah, what's the availability of this, or what's your ETA?
Yeah, so this module, to hit the performance that it's capable of, it does use some pretty specific parts, and unfortunately, some of them are victims of the current shortage worldwide. Things should be in stock in 2 months, but I've already been told that before, that everything was going to be in stock in 2 months. So I mean, I guess basically it's I'm going to do the best I can, and people will know when they're going to be available. And it hasn't been all terrible to kind of delay it, because there's been some new, as folks I talk to about design and some of the technical stuff and bounce ideas off of, as I've been able to show them the prototype, we've come up with some other ways to improve things. So it's not all bad. I mean, when it actually can be built and there's parts to build them, it's going to be an improved version. So I'm not getting too depressed about it, but I also wish I could just build things.
Well, I'm looking forward to finishing this segment and all the demos, and then sending it back to you to get it enhanced and revised, and getting it back and playing with it some more. So thanks, Dakota. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for going through it.